Good afternoon. Thank you for indulging us on our break. We are back in the hearing on docket 2019-182E. Let me do a roll call of commissioners, please. Commissioner, District 1.
Commissioner Williams is present in the hearing room.
District 3.
Present in the hearing room.
District 4.
Present virtually.
District 5.
Present virtually.
District 7.
Present in the hearing room.
I'm District 2, and I am present in the hearing room, and our chairman, District 6, is on military leave. I believe when we left off, we were on ORS. You're still presenting your witnesses. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. ORS calls its next witness, Mr. Brian Orey.
Mr. Orey, if I could get you to state your name for the record, please.
Brian Horry.
Thank you. The court reporter will swear you in.
Mr. Horry, if you would raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Horry,
Nelson.
could you please... I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Horry, could you please state your name and occupation for the commission?
Yes, my name is Brian Horry, and I am a senior partner with Energy and Environmental Economics, also known as E3.
Thank you, Mr. Horry. And are you the same Brian Horry who
Nelson.
pre-filed?
Mr. Nelson,
Yes,
we're having difficulty hearing Mr. Horry. Can he get closer to the microphone, or?
Is this better?
Not much. The court reporter's shaking her head.
Okay, let me do a technology change here. Okay, how's this?
That's better. Thank you very much. I apologize for the interruption.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to where we were, Mr. Horry, are you the same Brian Horry who pre-filed 44 pages of direct testimony with this commission in docket 2019-182E on October the 8th of this year?
Yes, I am.
And do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I have one correction. So I'd like to correct my testimony based on information I received from Duke after my testimony was filed. So on page 13 of my direct testimony, the sentence starting on line 5 and continuing through line 7 should be struck. That sentence begins, Duke indicated that, and ends with future solar choice metering tariff.
Thank you. Other than that one change, and let me interject here, Madam Chair, would you prefer that ORS file an errata, or is that sufficient for the change to Mr. Horry's direct testimony?
I'm advised that we do need an errata sheet, Mr. Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We will make sure that gets filed with the commission immediately after the hearing.
Thank you.
Other than that one change, Mr. Horry, if I asked you the same questions today as those that are presented in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Madam Chair, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Horry is amended from the stand be read into the record as if given orally.
Mr. Orey's pre-filed direct testimony as amended will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Horry, did you also file as an attachment to your direct testimony exhibits marked as BKH1, consisting of 7 pages, and BKH2, which consisted of 127 pages?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to either of those exhibits?
No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. ORS asks that exhibits BKH1 and BKH2, which were attached to Mr. Horry's pre-filed direct testimony, be marked for identification, entered in the record of this case as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Orey's pre-filed direct exhibits BKH1 and BKH2 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 15 and entered into the evidence of this case. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Horry, did you also prepare 13 pages of rebuttal testimony in this docket, which was filed with the Commission on October the 29th of this year?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Madam Chair, ORS asks the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Horry be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Ori's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horry, could you please give the Commission a brief description of your educational background and your professional experience?
Yes, I have over 30 years of experience in the energy industry. My areas of expertise include avoided costs, utility rate making, cost effectiveness evaluation, transmission and distribution planning, and distributed energy resources. Prior to joining E3, I was an expert witness for Pacific Gas and Electric Company on electricity rate making and cost allocation. I have previously testified before this commission on behalf of ORS on issues related to avoided costs and NEM compensation for DEC, DEP, and DESC.
Thank you. And can you please tell us why you were retained by the Office of Regulatory Staff in this proceeding?
ORS retained E3 to conduct analysis, review, and develop recommendations regarding the requirements of Section 584020C of the South Carolina Energy Freedom Act, which are to 1, investigate and determine the costs and benefits of the current net energy metering NEM program, and 2, establish a methodology for calculating the value of the energy produced by customer generators. ORS also retained E3 to address how avoided and embedded cost of service should be evaluated and utilized in the design of the solar choice metering tariffs considered in future proceedings pursuant to Section 584020F of Act 62.
Mr. Horry, did you prepare a summary of your direct and rebuttal testimonies?
Yes, I have.
Could you please present it for the Commission at this time?
Yes. My testimonies aim to be helpful to the commissioners as they consider how to reform NEM rates to compensate customers with solar, while at the same time eliminating or minimizing the cost shift burden created by behind-the-meter solar installations. I believe that there are a lot of voices in this proceeding that are focused on maintaining the profitability of the solar industry in South Carolina. And while a healthy solar industry is certainly a goal expressed by the legislature, I believe it is important to focus on the hundreds of thousands of non-solar customers and assure that any cost shift that must be borne by those customers is properly calculated so that the Commission may make a properly informed decision about the impact to non-solar customers, especially low-income and fixed-income customers. The other major points in my testimony, and I won't go through all of them, but the major ones are as follows. 1, the term cost shift can be interpreted in different ways. So it's important for this docket to have a clear definition of cost shift and understanding of the implications of that definition. Parties in this proceeding have presented non-standard cost-test approaches for evaluating rates and the cost shift. The Commission should not adopt Dominion's definition of the utility cost test because it does not provide any useful information to the proceeding. Also, the Commission should rely upon the RIM test, or ratepayer impact measure test, as is used across the industry for evaluating customer-sided options such as energy efficiency. And in that vein, the Commission should reject the position of solar industry witness Beach that bill savings used for the RIM test should only be for solar exports and not include bill savings for reductions in customer purchases from the utility. The utility standard has been to include participant bill reductions from lower purchases from the utility as part of or as a cost in the RIM test, and that should be maintained for the cost shift analysis done for evaluating solar tariffs as well. 2, using marginal cost is an appropriate method for estimating the cost shift, which is the financial burden shifted to all customers by the installation of solar or other DER. 3, regarding marginal costs, the list of avoided cost components adopted by the Commission Order 2015-194 is appropriate and should include non-zero T&D capacity costs for the evaluation of the cost shift and design of future solar choice tariffs. 4, embedded cost studies or embedded cost of service studies should also be conducted to comply with SC Code Section 584020D Item 2. The studies, however, should reflect the drivers of cost that we expect to see during the lifetimes of the solar installations that would be subject to the future solar choice tariffs, and not assume that generation and transmission capacity are caused by summer peak demands, because the South Carolina systems for Duke and DESC have, by the utilities' own admissions, shifted into the winter. 5, indirect economic costs and benefits should also be evaluated in this docket, as they will help inform the appropriateness of adopting solar choice tariffs that impose continued cost shifts. These benefits, however, should be evaluated as part of a supplemental look at the cost shift and not included in the primary cost shift analyses. Finally, it is worth noting that in order to minimize the cost shift from future solar choice tariffs, there are 2 basic choices. 1, the solar tariffs could be sophisticated and include charges that reflect how customers impose costs on the utility. An example of a sophisticated tariff would be one with a fixed monthly charge, time energy charges, and demand-based charges that are based on avoided costs. Through the sophisticated tariff, customer bill savings from installing a solar unit or other DER would be close to the cost savings to the utility and thus avoid a large cost shift. The second option is to have a simple tariff, but design that tariff based on the unique usage patterns and costs of the solar customers. By focusing the design on the usage patterns of the solar customers and not the usage pattern of the entire population of solar and non-solar customers, the simple tariff can collect the correct cost-based amount of revenue from the solar customers and also avoid a large cost shift to non-solar customers.
Thank you, Mr. Horry. Does that conclude your testimony?
Yes, it does.
Madam Chair, Mr. Horry is available for cross-examination or questions from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Dominion Energy, any cross?
No, Madam Chair. Cross. Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought you said Duke. Did you say, I couldn't hear very well. Did you say Duke Energy?
I apologize. Dominion Energy.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry, Mr. Gissner. I thought it was Duke.
No problem. Madam Chair, I do have a couple of brief questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Gissendanner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Horry, good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. My name is Matthew Gissendanner. I'm an attorney for Dominion Energy, South Carolina. And I just had a couple of brief questions with an area in your rebuttal testimony where you took issue with Mrs. Everett's testimony. And specifically on pages, the bottom of page 3 and on page 4, as you'll recall, Mrs. Everett testifies that if externalities are included in setting rates for NEM customers, then utilities cost will increase. But you testified that if externalities are included in setting rates, utilities costs do not increase. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
But I believe that you do acknowledge in your coffee shop example that regardless of whether the coffee shop providing participating customers an extra dollar, regardless of whether you consider that cost or a benefit, I believe you do acknowledge that the coffee shop must still collect the extra dollar from the non-participating customers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think it's important to keep in mind that when you're looking at rate design, let's say for residential, solar and non-solar customers, you sort of have a fixed amount of money that you want to collect. And my point was that if you include externalities in trying to decide how you want to collect money from non-solar and solar customers, that doesn't necessarily change the amount of money you need to collect. Now, what can change the amount of money you need to collect are changes in customer usage. For example, if customers consume less, then you'd have lower costs, and then you could change your cost collection. But the mere sort of inclusion and externalities in your rate design decision, that by itself isn't going to result in any cost change.
Okay, and so if I understood you correctly, you acknowledge that regardless of whether, setting aside the differences on whether it is a cost or whether it's a benefit, that regardless of how you characterize it, that in your example, it does result in a transfer between participating customers and non-participating customers.
Well, I would agree that the amount you charge or the rate can result in a cost shift. But I think, it sounds like you're trying to sort of take it sort of one step further and saying because that rate has been influenced by externalities, that externalities are causing that cost shift, and I guess that's what I'm a little, or causing a cost change, and that's what I'm sort of resistant to, because I still maintain that the actual total cost the utility needs to collect, that's not changed, just the decision on how you're collecting from one group of customers versus another.
I understand, Mr. Horry, and my only point is that in this case, and especially in light of the concerns raised by ORS witness Ruoff, because the coffee shop, in our example, because coffee shop customers in, say, Jasper and Orangeburg, if we assume there's only one coffee shop in the state, because coffee shop customers in Jasper and Orangeburg counties who may not have their own cup are going to pay more for a cup of coffee, another $1 more for a cup of coffee, because of the alleged benefit that Charleston customers who may have the money to bring their own cup of coffee are providing. It's imperative that it is clear, you would agree that it is imperative that it is clear that there is an actual benefit and the value of the benefit can be clearly determined. Would you agree with that?
I'm sorry to ask this, but could you restate, because I thought I was following where you're going with the question, and then it sort of veered off from where I was expecting.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Be happy to. Because as we've established in your coffee shop example, certain customers who bring their own cups will receive a $1 discount, and then the coffee shop may recover that $1 from other customers who do not bring their own cup. And my question was, in this state, of course, there's only, or in what we're talking about in say Dominion's area, there's only one coffee shop, and so because coffee shop customers in say Jasper and Orangeburg counties who don't have their own cup are going to pay $1 more for a cup of coffee because of an alleged benefit that coffee shop customers in Charleston who are able to bring their own cup are providing. Would you agree that it's imperative that it be clear that there is an actual benefit and that the value of the benefit is clearly determined before we charge the customers in Jasper and Orangeburg extra $1?
Well, I don't actually think that so the criteria or the hurdle for determining that it is an actual cost is the same as you would undergo for like a revenue requirement hearing. We're actually determining how much money, and let's say use the coffee shop example, how much money the coffee shop should be allowed to collect from all customers. And we're talking about a rate design and how much they decide to collect from one group versus another group. And so we're not actually changing the total amount of money we're collecting from all customers. It's just how much you collect from one group versus another. I will agree that, if, going back to our externality case, if you include externalities in the decision on how you set the solar choice tariff, and that results in a larger cost shift, or that allows you to, accept a larger cost shift, then that is more cost that will be borne by non-solar customers. But it's not changing the total cost to the utility. Again, it's just a shift between the two groups.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that point, and for purposes of these questions, I'm not taking issue with your characterization there. I'm simply saying before we include that externality, which is going to cause that cost shift, we want, and for purposes of this question, I'm assuming, as I believe that you are, that the externality is a benefit, that before we require non-participating customers to pay or to take on that cost shift, take on the burden of that cost shift, we need to be clear that that externality is in fact the benefit. We need to know that the value of that benefit is clearly determined. You would agree with that, correct?
I certainly definitely agree that you need to know directionally whether it's a benefit or a cost. I believe you should have, some comfort that you're using a value that's reasonable. But I think, there could be room to sort of allow more uncertainty in that kind of number than you would in other kind of rate-making proceedings, like when you're actually trying to decide, utilities revenue requirement. And I say that because, I've been doing rate design for decades. And, rate design really is, some people call it an art. That may be overstating it. But there's a lot of judgment involved in setting the rates. It's not purely based on the numbers. There are, many trade-offs you have to make among competing sort of goals and principles. And because I think there's a bit more sort of wiggle room you have there when you're looking at how you're going to be setting rates and when you're looking at how you're determining something like revenue requirements.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gissendanner. Now, Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are still not going to have any cross, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. South Carolina Appleseed Legal Justice Center.
We have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Nucor Steel, South Carolina.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Vote Solar.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association.
No questions, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Solar Energy Industries Association.
No questions, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Upstate Forever, CCL, SACE.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Energy Systems.
Thankfully, nothing from Alder. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Commissioners. Commissioners?
Madam Chair,
Oh, Commissioner Irvin.
thank you. I have a question for the witness. How do you consider penetration in the solar market as it relates to the rates and the cost shift?
Sure. There are, there's the simple answer of, the penetration level is going to sort of drive the cost shift impact or the magnitude of that impact on the non-solar customers. And so this is sort of obvious, this issue of cost shift wasn't really a big issue when solar penetrations were small. But as we're seeing more and more solar penetrations, then this issue is coming up in more and more jurisdictions. The challenge, I think, for the South Carolina Commission is that at the same time you're trying to manage the cost shift, you also are tasked with, avoiding disruption of the solar industry. So you want to continue sort of increased penetrations of solar to some degree, which means you have to be looking not only at the impact on non-solar customers, but also how this is going to be, affecting the future adoption of solar.
So how would you quantify South Carolina in terms of penetration for these for the two utilities that are involved in this proceeding?
I haven't looked closely at the penetration of behind the meter solar. Certainly for solar in total, including grid connected solar, South Carolina, is very high. It's one of the leaders in the amount of grid connected solar penetration. And unfortunately, because of that, that makes it a bit more of a challenge for the sort of customer located or behind the meter solar, because as you install more solar, that solar becomes less and less valuable to the system. You can think of it as the solar that's already there has already, moved your peak. You're no longer summer peaking, really, you're more winter peaking. And so that solar is really valuable in doing that, reducing the summer peak to the extent that it's not really a big concern. But because of that new solar that comes on, it's probably not doing a lot for your system anymore. Because it's just adding more generation mostly in the summer, which really isn't providing you that same benefit that the early solar did. So, certainly South Carolina has less penetration than, California and Hawaii, where we also do a lot of work. But I think because of the acts of the legislature and the commitment that there seems to be in South Carolina to do solar, I think it's still important to look at these cost shift issues. And, I think South Carolina is really being one of the leaders in the way you're really addressing this in a comprehensive manner to look at this problem before it gets out of hand.
So, do you think, what tools would you use to try to reduce the cost shift? What would be the tool? What tools do we need to pull out of the toolbox?
Yeah, so there are a lot of tools you can use. I mentioned one as the sophisticated tariffs, and it's kind of funny. You think about sophisticated tariffs. That's basically what like commercial and industrial customers generally have already, and because of that, usually don't see a big cost shift problem for them. We've heard a lot in this hearing about sort of non-residential customers and how they've largely sort of been ignored to an extent. Parties would argue whether that's the case, but certainly less discussion for the non-res. And I think a lot of that's because, we in the industry, we generally don't see that as the problem. It's like residential solar is like, a wide open door in the winter, and like non-res is like maybe you've got a weather shipping problem, right? So if we're focusing on the big problem, we don't worry about the non-res usually because they've usually got good sophisticated rates. Maybe the smaller commercial customers, they're more like res rates, so they could be a problem, but still it's not the same issue as we have with the whole res class. So sophisticated tariffs are one. Another thing you could do is design a rate that's based on sort of the cost of the non-solar customers. So this way, you can actually sort of set the rate so you're actually not ending up with a cost shift just as the byproduct of your normal residential rates, but you're actually getting to design a rate specifically for those customers. And so you can actually then, expressly, manage the amount of that cost shift. You can make that explicit trade-off between how much cost shift, if any, are we willing to accept in order to, meet the other goals of the healthy non-disruption to the, solar industry. I've looked at the Duke filing and the solar tariff metering solar choice metering tariff docket, and they offer some good suggestions there. Some of the things they're doing. Certainly, time of use rates. That's a good tool because that recognizes that, there's a fundamental problem with compensating solar based on a flat energy rate that doesn't vary by time of day, because the value of that solar provides to the system really does vary. So by doing time of use rates, you can get rid of that problem. Another thing that Duke does, interestingly, is they're changing the netting rules. So one of the things about net energy metering is, people talk about sort of the meter spinning backwards when you're exporting energy. But you're not credited typically with the value at the time you're exporting. You just sort of get a uniform value. And generally you're exporting in the summer or in the spring when it's really cheap, but you're getting credited at an average rate that actually reflects other costs in the evenings and mornings where it's a lot more expensive. So in a way, you're sort of getting overcompensated just because we aren't recognizing when you actually produce that energy. So I think doing something like TOU netting, like Duke suggests, probably takes away a lot of that problem. Another problem is solar is great for reducing energy, not so great for reducing peaks. And in terms of like what does a customer require in terms of equipment that the utility has to have there to serve them? I think a res customer, solar is going gangbusters during midday, but then in the evening it's not there. And general residential customers, that's when they're peaking. So the utilities have to design definitely their distribution systems for those evening peaks or maybe even morning peaks, depending on the winter situations. And the solar customers really aren't, contributing much to reducing the need for that equipment. So there's, not much savings there. As you go further up the system, transmission system, there may be some more benefits. But again, it's this problem of when you have a very simple, flat energy rate that you're using for compensation, it's hard to really correctly model what the cost savings are, or maybe I should say, it's hard to get the credit you're giving back to customers to reflect the value you're providing to them, because it's just too blunt of an instrument. So I'm sorry I went on quite a while, but hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, sir. In terms of netting, is hourly netting being utilized now?
The standard is to do like annual netting or monthly netting. I actually think hourly netting makes a lot of sense from an economist's perspective. It could be pretty harsh though. I'm actually wondering if Duke has actually looked at doing on an hourly basis rather than a TOU basis. And we'll see in the next skit how all that plays out. But that could certainly be another way to reduce the potential for cost shifts. Potentially that could maybe reduce the compensation too much for the solar industry though, so it might be too extreme a measure.
So you would recommend monthly?
I don't like monthly. I think by TOU, sort of netting by TOU within the month is probably a pretty reasonable thing to do. But again, I'd like to see the information that Duke has used in coming up with their proposal in the next docket to really form or have a more informed decision based on numbers.
Thank you, Dr. Horry. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioners? Mr. Nelson, any redirect?
No redirect, Madam Chair. That's ORS's case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ori, thank you for your testimony and for your presence today. You may step down.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, you said that was your case?
Yes, ma'am. That Brian Forey was our last witness. That's our case.
Okay. Any other than getting a better understanding of proposed orders, or are there any other matters that need to come before the committee? Did anybody want closings? Okay, hearing none. I didn't mean to cut anybody off, but I'm gonna put Mr. Stark on our commission attorney to talk to you about proposed orders.
Parties, I'm David Stark with the Public Service Commission. We have been evaluating the time of production for the transcript as well as the needs and desires of the commissioners. And as I understand it, I would like to see if it is mutually agreeable for a January 7th due date for proposed orders. I believe that reflects approximately 4 weeks after delivery of a completed transcript. Well, I can call on people to get responses. Dominion?
Mr. Stark, I believe Ms. Shirley Smith was trying to speak.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
Good afternoon, Mr. Stark. That time frame sounds good to us. We thought it was important to have time with a complete transcript, and this gives us an adequate amount of time with a complete transcript, and we're agreeable with the schedule. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Stark, this is Matt Gissendaner with Dominion Energy, and we're agreeable to the schedule as well.
Thank you. Do I have any opposition to the schedule? Hearing none, Madam Chairman, I think January 7th is an agreeable date for proposed orders.
Thank you, Mr. Stark, and thank you, parties. That's the first time I've had to write 2021, so might as well get used to that, I suppose. Thank you all for your participation, your working with the commission, working with a new commissioner, trying to chair a hearing, and appreciate all of the presentations and look forward to the proposed orders and as we continue to delve into this docket. And if there's nothing further, you better speak up quick because I'm getting ready to shut it down. Anything? Thank you all, and this hearing is now closed, and everyone have a good afternoon. Thank you.